All right. Shawn Day, Higher League Chill, 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. That's right. Not a Thursday like we did last week or 2 weeks ago, but we are on again on Tuesday at 4. And I haven't been on in a little bit. I think we were on like the first week, and I'm battling a little bit of a cold flu type of thing. The kids have it. The bus drivers have it at school. So bear with the cough drop as I'm talking and choking on things. So I don't have my intro because my VA and I are not on the same page. Mainly, she's on the correct page and I'm on the wrong page. So I don't blame her. It's my fault for that. Real quick before I introduce a really, really interesting guest that we had some good conversation a day or two ago, a patent holder and some other cool things. But let's talk a little bit about the Growth Hub and Higher League Chill and recruiting for like 2 minutes, and then we'll get into it. And we're going to talk about streamlining and cost reduction and maybe marketing and some things like that. We've got a ton of people signing up. I've done a lot of demos over the last about week and a half. And for you out there that, which is most of our audience that kind of gear up for the springtime, I know it's been cold in a lot of parts of the country, but we're already basically in February. Keep that in mind. So if you're looking to get your spring board full with marketing, which the demand's out there, if you are a good company and you know how to market a little bit, you will have the phones ringing. The demand will be there. You need to solve the employee side of this equation, or you're going to leave tens of thousands of dollars on the table, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. Don't do that again. Reach out to me. My calendar link will be posted somewhere around here. Hopefully, Trish is listening to that and she'll post that somewhere. But if not, I'll post it immediately right after. We've got pressure washing companies, landscape lighting. I just signed up like 7 landscape lighting companies by word of mouth and because referrals and that sort of thing. So we're doing a hell of a good job out there. The market right now is best to start recruiting if you're ramping up for spring. Because if you time it up now, if we did a demo sometime this week, you like what you heard and we're ready to go, we might be live we certainly would be live the following week. That's February, like the first week of February. You need to get application flow, get some interviews. We're in mid-February by the time all of that happens. Now, we've had companies that have hired literally within a week from signing up with us and had application flow, interviews, and hires. And so I don't like to overpromise that. So, and you need time for training and all that type of stuff too. So that's it. Hook up with me 30 minutes. And you guys know this. This is how I do my demos. This is what we do. This is what we do best. And this is what we do for the majority of our clients. You own the business. We're sort of a consultant in all of this. We'll handle everything for you, though, either manually or automation. And at the end of it, I always say, here's some service options, here's some pricing options, or you can steal things that I just showed you and try it on your own. Either way, I'll support that. I'll back you. I just want you to feel 100% better that you're going to be able to execute on your hiring needs so that you can make as much money as possible in the spring. That's all I care about. So with that said, I'm going to bring in our guest. Erika, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. And it's Erika Giuggio, right?
That's correct.
Tricky for me. I'm glad I landed it, man. I landed it really well. Why don't we do this? Start by just telling the folks out there a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just start chanting along and see where we end up.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a cost reduction expert in the trades, contractor, and home service space. And people that are listening, you're probably thinking, how did someone like myself even get here? Well, I graduated in urban planning, and I realized at the time that this space is very messy. And a lot of people focus on pouring the concrete, doing the trade, pressure washing the driveway. But when they get home, and I don't blame you, you want to crack open up a beer and not worry about the business side. And then when you get to the business side, things can get a little bit messy. So I'm here to help alleviate those things and reduce some of those expenses. And that's a little bit about me.
That is perfect. That's one of the things I hate. I hate cutting costs because it's really, you have to dig deep sometimes and find out where things are and what's going on. And, it just, I like to have relationships with vendors And so there's a balance there. Do you let me step back though, because the urban planning thing. How did you get set up in that, or how did you fall into urban planning? What is exactly urban planning?
Okay, so urban planning is one step removed from, let's say, a civil engineer,
Okay,
and one step removed from somebody that's in construction. So they're looking at everything as a bird's eye view and looking at a parcel of land and trying to humanize that piece of land and saying, okay, we're going to zone if this was a Browns field and now we can turn the soil, what can we do with this land to accommodate the community?
nice.
So it's not necessarily about, okay, let's just put a whole bunch of homes here, but how do we create parks and how do we bring the community together through a piece of land?
That's cool. My wife of 31 years worked for a city here locally where we're at, Northeast Ohio, in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and she's been there for a number of years. I'm sure she's counting the seconds for retirement, in fact. But she is very much involved in a lot of that type of thing, and she gets behind in executive sessions and all those sorts of things to understand. And a lot of executive sessions have to do with land and plotting and planning and selling and planning, that sort of thing. So I did that. Um, the the urban development too is a lot to do with, like you said, today I'm going to imagine there's a lot of sustainability issues that go on along with that. I'm on a park board actually here in my neighborhood where I am. I'm on the Parkside Park Board. So we're always looking for ways to try to improve the park for the community. And so we just, I get asked to come aboard on the park board, and the next thing I know, I'm battling things with pickleball courts. I never imagined dealing with pickleball court issues, but it's a bit, number one, pickleball is huge, right? And it's volunteers mushing together with public money, and we're sort of in the middle of that, and public. You can't please everybody. It's a very difficult thing to have the citizen heard, respected, and to think you're going to come out unscathed and everybody's going to be happy. The urban development is a tough thing to navigate.
It is. You're the intermediary. And by the way, I'm a picklehead, so I vote for the pickleball courts.
Yep, I am too.
But you're right. It's you have to find this middle ground. You're not going to make everybody happy. You have people that want to put their bids in to buy the land and do what they want to do with it. Then you have the people, and it's hard. And I think sometimes that's where I kind of fell out of love with it a little bit because there's so many hands in it. And I was listening to another podcast the other day with Sebastian Maniscalco, and he was saying the Empire State Building took just over a year to build, but his kitchen took over a year, more than a year and a half to get finished. And he goes, you have to sometimes leave some people out of it because when there's too many people putting their opinion in forget it.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a hard climate to when you have a lot of egos on the table and a lot of stuff going on with people that are used to making decisions at the top of whatever organization they're in, and then you mesh them all together. That's a challenge. Let me get your background on. I think you've also got some experience in marketing and things like that. But what cost reduction helps you spend a little bit more money on recruiting and marketing. Tell me, when you look at cost reduction, I'm assuming you go into a business, you analyze and you look over numbers, and then is there a value on a good relationship with a vendor versus and maybe spending a little bit more on that, or is it just dollars and cents?
To be honest, it's going to be a bit of both. So what we look at, and especially for home service, is going to be merchant services, fuel, ELD, shipping, and we also look at uniforms and linens. Those are the biggest ones. Now, when we're looking at the vendors and those relationships that companies currently have and these home services currently have, we actually prefer that you stay with your vendor because you've already built those relationships. What we're going to do is we're going to look at each and every line item and figure out, do you need this? Are you using this? Why do you need this? And is this necessary? For example, merchant services. With a lot of home services, I'm looking at their bills, their interchange fees are high, and they have what's called sometimes a global fee. So a lot of these merchant service companies will put this particular line item in. If you're not doing business internationally, you don't need that. But they're not going to tell you that because, right, they're going to try to make sometimes every extra dollar out of you. Think of your cell phone bill. Sometimes you'll see, okay, like here's $2 here, $2 there, but when you're looking at a commercial or business scale, it adds up.
Yeah.
So I would first and foremost say, you know what, let's look at what we can do currently. And if you like the quality of that current service, there's no reason for you to change. I don't burn a bridge. But what we do is we'll look at other current vendors in your area and just compare and see what can we do, what can we not do? Because sometimes your uncle, your friend, you don't want to get rid of that relationship. If they're doing you a favor, stick with that. And I vouch for that. There's certain companies, if someone says, "Hey, you know, I'm going to give you $20 less on a cell phone bill," I'll tell them, "No. I like my company because the customer service is great." So, for each and every person that we work with, if you're getting good customer service and you like them, stick with them. But if you want to look at dollars and cents, absolutely we'll look at dollars and cents.
Okay, that's something I never thought about. That a lot of times when you look at cost reduction, a lot of times you just kind of shop around, right, or do that sort of thing and try to find the cheapest this or that or whatever it is. Keeping your same and just trying to figure out, do you need this? Why are you? And, there's a lot of shiny objects out there that we go after, right? And I've been fallen victim to that too, where I and it usually will end up burning you. There's things that I thought I was going to use a number of times and used it twice, and then it sits around doing nothing. There's those, and then what? One of the things, I've been involved with acquisitions and sales of some businesses along my career. And one of the first things that happens when you take over a business, buying a business, is exactly what you're talking about. You look at the cost. What is going on with the cost here? We don't necessarily want to change vendors because it gets disruptive with supply chain and equipment and product and that you need for your business. Have you dealt with a lot of that with acquisitions or anything like that? That would be an interesting sort of niche almost to be involved with.
What's funny and interesting about when a company merges or it gets acquired is they're very lenient and open to reducing on the expenses, especially if we stay within the current vendor and just say, hey, listen, can you reduce this? Here's what the other players are offering. Where I'm finding that they're struggling with is if it gets acquired by a company that's 50 years old and they've been doing things the same thing forever and ever.
Yeah.
And then you come in and the new person says, well, I'm going to change this and this when it comes to the processes and systems. Then they start freaking out. And
Yeah.
that's where I've noticed that it's a little bit harder.
That would make sense. That would definitely make sense. So what is it about the cost reduction that is difficult for a business owner to figure out on their own?
I would say, well, it's not that they can't figure it out on their own. I think everything, if you go on YouTube and you take a course, you can figure a lot of things out on your own. There's no secret to that. It's the time aspect. and learning how to do it and negotiating those deals. And we have 3,700 vendors across the US and Canada. There is no way a company is going to be able to acquire that in a short amount of time. So they'll pay somebody, let's say $80,000 to do the role that what we can do. But that person, you have to acquire them, you have to onboard them. You know, they need benefits, pension. They're looking for those things.
Yeah.
So it's similar to marketing. So people would come to, when I was in the marketing space, they'd say, I can do this. And I'm like, yes, you can. But how much time do you want to take to learn this? What is your opportunity cost to do it? And how are you going to get there with everything else you're doing on top of it? So I think that's the biggest piece, is the time. And then when we find the savings, you're getting that back to invest in other parts, versus it would probably take you years to be able to do and go over each line item. And do they even have time?
Right. Especially if you're growing a business and trying to scale it and get to the next level. So a couple things come to mind. It's exactly what we do with the recruiting end, right? You can't, everybody has gone on Indeed and maybe Facebook and wherever else, and so on and so forth. But the thing that I always tell people is, nobody that I know of gets into almost any business, let alone the home service space, because they love recruiting and interviewing and posting job ads on Indeed. I've never heard that story, and I've talked to thousands of business owners all over the country and a little bit into Canada and so on. So it's always nice to be able to outsource those things that we don't necessarily like to do. We don't necessarily want to take the time to do it. And so outsourcing those types of things, because you got to dig really deep in some cost control stuff. It's not always obvious and apparent, or you would have addressed it already very quickly, because it's smacking you in the face going, I'm here, help, fix this, right? So you got to do that. There's a lot of time involved in that. One of the things you mentioned is you've got 3,700 vendors across the country. What does that mean? So there are cases where somebody would go to a different vendor, obviously, if the vendor they're using and they have no relationship with necessarily, or guys have just been using them and haven't taken the time to shop around or whatever it is.
So, sorry, can you repeat that again in terms of what about the 3,700 vendors?
Yeah, you said you had 3,700 vendors, and we were just talking about a good relationship with the vendor you already have. So you go into it with the idea that it's better not to change the vendor if possible, and save money doing and staying with the same people. But there's times where we don't have a relationship with a vendor necessarily, or we're not married to them necessarily. It's very transactional. And they haven't given the best service in the world. I just haven't messed with it because we've been doing this for 5 years the same way. What are these vendors? Is that the purpose behind the 3,700 vendors that you have, or?
I would say that, yes, that's one of the purposes, is to have that stack and to be able to go into that stack and say, hey, listen, we're going to try, if you're in California within a certain area, we're going to try to get you that best deal. But the other piece of it too is, they're not just vendors. We've created relationships with these guys and these people. And think of us as the Walmart of suppliers. So Walmart will go to P&G and say, thank you for supplying us with 100 Swiffers. They did great in our stores. But now, because they're so big, Walmart can go to P&G and say, I need you to produce this Swiffer or this product at this price. And that's the level of relationships we have now, because we're buying in bulk and we have these relationships in bulk with people all over Canada and the US. We're able to negotiate rates that the little guys or the small businesses, it's going to be harder for them to do it on their own.
Okay.
And that's the value and the type of relationship we have with the vendors, and we're able to do.
What would you say is the I've got two questions, and one might be tricky to answer them, and I get it, so don't worry about it. Because I never really go into discussion before I go live with anything with anybody guest that I have on, so everybody realizes that. One is, what would you say is the most common area a home service business is bleeding money, and you need to address that with them to reduce those costs? That's one question. What's the most common you see? And the other one is, what is one maybe that we don't think of that's maybe not the most common or the most cost savings, but the one where you hear the most, oh my God, I never even thought about that.
Okay, there's a few here. So I would say telecom is a big one.
Okay.
Especially if you have, let's say, 10 trucks on the road. So if you have 10 employees and each of them have a cell phone each, instead of having, let's say, $100 cell phone, we can usually negotiate that down to $38. But where they're also bleeding in that is they're looking at plans with a lot of data per se, or with a lot of calling in and calling out, text message and things like that. But you can also go to VoIP, which connects to your data, and you can go. That's where they're bleeding quite a bit, is the type of system that they have. Where they're also, and not necessarily in home services, but where I've seen this quite a bit, is somebody will sometimes have a phone for each job site. And I'm thinking to myself, why do you need a phone for each job site? You need one phone with just different lines. That's it. I had one client that had 4 different phones, one for each job site for each employee. Makes no sense.
Interesting.
The other big piece I would say for home service I've noticed recently, and it's not necessarily that they're bleeding, but I would encourage them to do, is get a merchant service POS terminal. A lot of people, and I would say, especially in residential, they're wanting to go on all these payment plans. I hear it quite often. And you can either say, hey, listen, we're going to take cash, we're going to take a check, or we're going to start a payment plan. But if you're having cash flow issues, or if they're taking a long time, at least you can put that on a credit card and there's something to back it. So that's another common one. One that we have is fuel. So some people, it's not necessarily that they're bleeding dry out of it, but they just don't think about it.
Yeah.
If you're doing over $10,000 a month in fuel on your trucks, why not get a fuel card? So some people will put that just on their credit card and write it off and call it a day, but monitor it. Because first of all, you can get 10 cents off on the fuel cards, which at the end of the year will add up. Second of all, you can understand where that fuel is going. So if I give you a bill and I say, hey, you know what? I spent $56 today at this gas station. Sometimes what happens is people will buy extra stuff. They'll buy chips, they'll buy pop.
Right.
And when the accountant gets the bill and they're like, listen, like we gotta itemize this, or we gotta do different things because it doesn't go in the gas category, it makes things more complicated. So we've noticed that employees do that as well. And sure, go buy yourself snacks, but just put that somewhere else. The other piece where they don't understand where they're bleeding dry is sometimes employees, not all the times, people are honest out there, but they'll take out, let's say, $10 out of the fuel tank, like they'll funnel it out with
Yeah.
and you wouldn't notice because you're like, oh, okay, it's just $10. And they'll do that every day. And then when you start looking at the numbers, you're like, okay, this doesn't add up with the fuel consumption. That's a big one.
Yep.
ELD is also another one because
What is it? I'm sorry.
electronic devices.
Oh, yep.
Logging devices. So if you're a landscaper or a pressure washer, it's not necessarily about knowing all the time where your employees are, where the truck is, or understanding logistics. But maybe, let's say you're in landscaping, you'll want to know things about weather tracking.
Yeah.
And there's elements to it that they have that it doesn't just track let's say the GPS portion, but how are they stopping when they get to a light? How are they speeding up? So when the insurance company calls and says, hey, what's the performance of your drivers, it does make a big difference.
Yeah, that I was going to ask you, the biggest expense is always labor cost. So that's great. You were ahead of my question, which is beautiful. Those are the main ones, right? Everything is labor cost. Then you've got some cleaning supplies, maybe, or some supplies to take care and service your client. And another big one is equipment, and you've addressed that with the fuel. That's why it's a big deal. But there is some, one of the things that we look at in our industry, and it's switched to big time, is from paying just hourly to paying performance pay or a commission type, even for technicians. And I think that helps address some of that wasted time, that happens. But you still have to go fill up the truck. You still have to insure it. Insurance is outrageous anymore, and fuel is always going to be expensive. And if you can either add it directly to your bottom line, okay, saving money, or invest it so that you can grow your business, those are all good things. But one thing that people don't think about is maybe you can control your costs a little bit better for your clients at the end and still maintain or grow your margins without raising the price as much, especially over the last several years, maybe not several years, but the last certainly 3 years of inflation, 4 years of inflation that's gone through the roof here certainly in the United States. That is something where you can raise your price maybe 5 or 10% instead of 50% and still maintain or increase your margin at least a little bit. So there's so many benefits to the cost reduction game. What is something that you think people scratch their head and go, I never thought about that one? Is there any others that you have with that?
I would say the uniforms and linens is huge.
Okay.
Because it's not just about buying like the safety equipment and going to your, let's say, your local safety store or Mr. Safety, but also like the cleaning of it, the putting it in the wash. That's a big one as well. And they don't think of that because you just bring your uniform home and you put it in the wash and that's it. But if you had a service that went in and out and they get all the grease and the dirt out of it, it makes a big difference. And then you don't have to keep buying your employees a new uniform every single time. That's what is also another big one.
That is huge. I used to have a cleaning company, and I hated anything to do with the laundry and stuff and uniforms and all that stuff. Yeah, that's so. With the cost reduction strategies that you have, it also overlaps operational and process type of things that we often talk about in the home service space. So we're always talking, you got to have your systems in place. You got to have your systems in place, right? That's a big part of it, is those processes and systems on cost reduction too. So what sort of consulting do you do, or types of things do you do to help with that? That you just mentioned one, the process of what you can do to save money with your uniforms. What are some other things like that that you deal with? You don't get into like CRM stuff and things like that, or tell me a little bit more about operational things you touch on.
So I have the basics of the basics when it comes to SaaS and the CRM and all that stuff. But it's non-construction, home service, or trades focus. And when I get on calls with businesses, what I usually do when I'm done with all the operational stuff that I can handle, that's where I bring my partners in and I say to them, listen, this is not my expertise, but I want you to go talk to this person that can help you create a CRM to do better. Or if they say, hey, listen, I've had a lot of high turnover. Now I'm going to say you need to go talk to Shawn because he's going to help you get from point A to point B and retain those employees. So I look at their books and I see some of the cracks in the foundation. And now that I've given them back some money, whether that's 26,000, 100,000, whatever we save at the end of the year, I will make that recommendation and say, hey, let's go, let's fix that next crack.
Yeah. One of the things too that came to mind, and I've experienced this as a business owner. I'm not like a real detailed type of person. So I can lose my focus. I'm not like a cat following that laser, because I mean, that thing's gone and I'm on to the next thing, right? Um, how long, what does this program look like? So you come in, somebody high fives you, thanks, and says thanks. Do you go away, or is this an ongoing month to month thing? Or because I can see, just like I talked, in, like you mentioned, with culture, with turnover, one of the things we talk about in Hire Lead Chill is culture, core values, leadership. Let's tie those things together. Let's make sure they're culture is one of those things that can go away really, really, really quickly if you don't continue to follow up with it, manage it, and be very. Somebody needs to be involved with it daily. And the owner usually isn't somebody that's the right person to do that. But once you have that off the rails, it is extremely hard to get back on the rails. What does that look like when, the follow-up? Is it dependent on how big the company is? Talk to me a little bit about that, because it seems like it could be something that's a recurring problem.
Yes, and this is a bit of a loaded question, but we have two ways that we go about this.
Okay.
We have what's called, and how the program works is, in 90 days or less, we're going to find out if we can improve your bottom line with what's called a free comprehensive audit. So we're going to look at some of your books, we're going to look at some of your bills, and just so that everyone's aware that's listening, snitches get stitches. So I don't look.
Yeah, I like it. We're going to edit that. That's going to be a short. I'll tell you that right now. That'll be a short.
There you go. So I look at cash flow and I look at the debits, but I'm not looking specifically at what's coming in cash and credit and everything else. But I look at your bills and I figure out by each and every line item what that looks like. So within that, I'm going to ask you for your permission to look at and to speak on your behalf to your vendors. And we look at each and every line item. Then we come back within 4 to 6 weeks later with what's called the value report. So we find out where we can find savings within your current vendors, as well as our pool of vendors. And at the end, you have the opportunity to say, hey, I'd really like to implement these savings or these changes. Or you might say, hey, you know what? I don't like what you put together. And that's okay. And 80% of the time, we will find savings within your current vendors and within our stack as well. Then what we do from there is, so we implement the changes, and I would say about quarterly or half a year or yearly, depending on what the company decides they want to do. We come back with a meeting and say, hey, what's going on? Do you like the changes that we implemented? Here's another example. We might implement a new telecom company, or you might say, hey, you know what? I really like my telecom company. I don't want to change it. But we might find savings within it. But then 6 months down the road, you might say, their customer service is terrible. I want to change. So we can find ways within your contracts, and this is where our head office will look at not just all the line items on your bill, but the legalities of it, and they'll find ways out of your contract. And we can rework it to something else that you're more comfortable with and that you like. And so think of us like financial advisors.
Yeah.
2007, great. 2008, terrible. So we're there when it's great and we're there when it's bad and we need to make some changes. You might say, hey, you know what? I'm doing really, really well. And we negotiated 10 cell phones for 10 employees, but you might have 20 next year. So we can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we have another 10, give us a better deal. What can you propose for us? So that's the free audit. And that's that program. Then you might say to me, hey, listen, you know what? I'm more on the DIY side, and I just need help with a few categories. Can you help me negotiate a better deal on merchant services? So I have another program where we'll help you with that. We'll get you the better pricing. But let's say in 6 months from now, we'll be there, but we don't have that one-to-one connection year after year. It's a one and done thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have two different options.
Okay, so you have a long-term relationship and a transactional type of thing too. Either way, you're going to be able to save money by doing some investigating and figuring some things out that you're a professional at, and you guys know better than anybody. So one of the owners of Higher Lead Chill also owns a bookkeeping company, Dan Plata, and Dan is very good and does the books for maybe 1,000 companies now. I don't even know what he's up to now, but he has done the books for thousands of companies over the years. And he's got a really good bookkeeping business, and he can tell pretty much instantly when somebody's percentage is off on man, your labor seems to be up like 5%. That's a big chunk. Your marketing, why are you marketing when you have no people here? You need to start recruiting. You're wasting money. Nobody's going to be able to get. So those are some things but he really doesn't, and he might correct me on this, but I know his business pretty well because we're chummy, good buds. He doesn't spend the time or have this outsourcing capabilities that he'll have this type of service with. So even if you know your numbers are off somewhere, it doesn't give you the answer on how to fix it all the time, right? We don't know how to fix the problems that we have sometimes, and that's why they're a problem. And I think you've got a lot of benefit to at least one, a free opportunity to find out if you can save money. It's free to find out if you can save money. That is a no-brainer to me. And then, if you can, here's what we think we can save you, and this is what we need to do it. Now, are some of these things going to be operational things, and some are going to be you need a new vendor, and some of them are you should be outsourcing this instead of doing this in house. What talk through a little bit more about those kind of 2 or 3 things there.
So I would say I focus strictly on the vendor side.
Okay.
When it comes to the outsourcing piece, that's where someone like you, Shawn, would come in.
Okay.
Because, like you said, I came from the marketing world. I can see that if they're spending $20,000 a month on marketing, and even for a home service company, unless you're going national, there's no need for that.
Yeah.
But what I'll say is, hey, listen, I think you're spending X amount on this. I would recommend talking to this person that is focused in the blue collar space, that'll get you what you're looking for, and here's their number. So I'll bring it in, but I don't focus on it because that's my area of expertise. I can't be a jack of all trades, and I don't want to be the jack of all trades. But I'll bring it in there, because especially the first call, when someone asks me, or when I ask them, what are your goals? Why aren't you growing? And what are your challenges? Everything comes out of the Pandora box.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, and we haven't touched on this yet. So we've talked a great deal about cost reduction and a variety of different sort of either strategies or tactics behind that. But you just touched on something that I don't always think about when I think about reducing costs is growing. So there's something there. There's some sort of lever you can pull. I know that's a much easier way to explain what you'd actually do. That helps a company grow. So you do have some focus on their growth, not just on saving money.
Correct, because I can, even for myself, I can shop at Walmart, but whatever I save at the end of the week, just personally, and if I don't invest it and have somebody to make that money grow for me, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Personally, for me, and one thing that I've learned through the companies that I've owned now and companies I've worked with, bring in a bunch of people to help you. There's no I in team. And once everyone's got their expertise and they bring it together, they can help you grow. And when you bring in somebody that's outsourced, and I used to say this to people all the time, You can have somebody in-house, let's say for marketing, and charge, and they will, let's say their salary will be between 68 to 80,000. But if you can bring in an outsourced, even a white label team, and they're working for you part-time, and they're a contractor and they'll help you grow, you don't have to worry about benefits. And now you have 10 employees for the price of one.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yep. I'm writing that down. I love that. Okay. So what do you have a certain niche size company that you work with, whether it's revenue or employee count, or what does that look like?
Great question. I would say for me, I like to work with a company that's doing $1 million and up.
Yep.
And once you hit that threshold, of course, we can start doing some different types of savings. But even if you're a little bit below that, if you're doing, let's say, 20,000 on your merchant services, I can work with that. If you
Okay.
have 10 phones, I can work with that. If you're doing $350 a month just on shipping, we can make that work.
Okay,
And,
great.
and even if not, I'll even help you look a little bit at some of the strategies and your bills to say, hey, go back and negotiate this, or
Yeah.
look at certain things.
And I think that's a really cool niche there. And $1 million is really one of those sort of what we talk a lot about here is a purgatory for businesses where they get stuck at that ceiling, and they try to work their way out, and a lot of times they don't realize how much money you need to grow from that point. And there's a lot. Growth is very expensive. In the real world, a lot of times, depending on your industry and where you're at, if you're the owner and you're paying yourself 150 grand a year, and you need to bring on somebody that's going to cost 60 grand a year, okay, and your revenue's not changing and your margins aren't changing, you got to give up a big chunk of your salary to get there, okay? What if we can grab 50% of that through Erika's methods here and strategies here, and you don't have to take that big chunk out of there and worry about that. So there's a lot of stress relief that goes along with reducing cost as well, right? And I think that's there's so many benefits to it that people don't realize. And the first thing that I've got a buddy that's in finding tax credits, and we do tax credit stuff, and there's this, okay, so how much, you're going to save me this, and I got to pay you that, and then do I have to pay this? And is it based on how much you save? Is it a big chunk? You don't need to go into pricing necessarily, because things are so. I don't go into pricing until I talk to somebody, because I don't know what you're looking for until we talk and what we can do. So I don't want you to do that necessarily, Erika. Certainly, if you want to, you can, but you don't have to get in that mess. But what is sort of somebody's expectation when you come there? Is there let me unfold this a little bit. There's two questions I have as I blabble down the road here. One is, what is sort of the average that you might be able to save a company percentage wise, if you know that? And then what is the payment to you? Is it based on a contingency? Is it a percentage of savings? Is it a combination of a few things? Tell me a little bit about that.
So the average percentage is 28% per year.
20?
28.
28. Nice.
Yeah, just on the operations piece.
Okay.
So in dollars and cents, that's 26,000 to 100,000 per year per location, depending on the nature of your business. So how it works is when you get that free audit, it's a percentage of the savings. So we keep 50% of the savings, and the company saves 50% of those savings.
Okay.
So if, for example, you save 100K, you're going to keep that 50K for 3 years. And we do it over and over and over again. So you get you're saving the 50K. Now you're saving on the employee. We do all the back end work for you, and we have continuous meetings throughout the year, just like a financial advisor. They're going to make you money, and then at the end of the year you're going to have to you pay on the fees that they make you. That's exactly how it works.
Okay, that's a great business model. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it is a lot like a financial advisor or a Charles Schwab or whatever, type of brokerage platform. Same type of business model, pay structure. And so there is some soft cost that goes in there that is sort of not seen in the bank account necessarily too. And you mentioned a few of those. Time is money, training people, turnover type of thing. So there's a lot that goes into that. What would you recommend that somebody does right now to get in touch with you? And how long does this audit, or how long is the first sort of conversation or consultation, and then what sort of happens through there? Tell me like what the roadmap looks like.
Sure. So to be honest, from beginning to end, all I need is maximum 3 hours of your time. That's literally it. So the first session is 30 minutes, and I just need to get to know you and what you're looking for and how we can save. Then after that, we have what's called a service agreement, where it just says, hey, just so you know, we're diving into your expenses and we're going to be speaking on your behalf. In that second meeting, you're going to give me some of your bills and your contacts for particular companies. The third meeting is we come back to you with what's called a value report. We see what we found in those savings, and you're done for the whole year. That's literally it.
Okay, great. Do you get contacted? So here's the situation. These are all relationships and money that's been going out for anywhere from several months to several years. Okay, well, I've got this other thing I'm doing now because we've got a lot of our clients that have 2-3 different businesses that they're dealing with. Hey, I'm thinking about getting a Christmas light seasonal business. Is that something where they should probably contact you, or is it something that you don't really advise on how you're going to start up a business, but we're going to fix the problems that you've been habitually wasting money on?
I mean, any businesses that are seasonality, why not? We can actually come there in the beginning and start negotiating those better rates. In fact, most industries now, post-pandemic, I've noticed nothing is ever permanent.
Yeah.
It's not, things are not how it used to be. Everything has a season. And even if you're just starting out, come to me. I will help you find things that you probably don't even know. So often people will, let's say, go to Stripe because they recognize that that is a merchant terminal. It connects with everything, and that's the best thing that I know and I'm going to use. But their interchange fees are high. And people go to that because in the beginning, it's usually around like the $10,000 mark that you start going into some better savings and companies that do different things. But I would say absolutely reach out to me. And I know you asked the question before. You can reach me on my website, which will be in the show notes, or you can just reach me on at 416-605-0193. And absolutely, I'd be glad to help you out.
Okay, give me a phone number one more time.
416-605-0193.
Awesome. Okay. All right. We're going to wrap it up. I'm getting close to the 45-minute mark here or so. I guess we're over it, but let me get this wrapped up. But before I do, is there any other like ancillary services to what we've talked about that you offer in any way? Any other service streams that you offer, or is this your main focus, the cost reduction and growth?
This is my main focus. But if you come to talk to me and say, hey, I need a loan, I need someone to do tax credits, I need somebody that focuses strictly on marketing and blue collar, I will help you. I will make those recommendations. that's something that when you're in a certain niche and space, I have all the contacts and I'd be glad to help you out on that.
Okay, awesome. Every now and again, we've got entrepreneurs as clients and viewers that start a pressure washing company or something like that, or they start to franchise out. So if somebody's out there that listens to this and catches a bit of our content here in our podcast, um, can they also reach out to you to see how they can get on the vendor list?
Absolutely. And also going back to the franchise piece of it.
Yep.
So what I do now is part of a franchise.
Oh, okay,
I
cool.
know somebody that he has 8 franchises in the home service space, grew from $0. I highly, highly recommend somebody start out in that space because there's systems and processes. So if you're
Yep.
thinking about doing it on your own or starting from not from scratch, I will make that connection for you as well.
Wonderful. I'm intrigued with the processes and systems. I actually had John Hewitt on my podcast. I think it was, I don't know, it was sometime at the end of last year, who is a huge franchise guy. He's got the tax stuff. Um, and he was really pleasant to have on. He's done very well for himself. But he had said that there's a disease that small business owners have, and that disease is a lack of discipline in processes and systems. And he's right. And you go from that to Michael Gerber and E-Myth and all that sort of thing. And as you grow, it's hard to adjust and change your processes. You need to change processes when you have more people that are coming in, or you're outsourcing different things. A lot of times we get different revenue streams. Christmas lights, now I want to do that. Whatever, landscape lighting, I used to just do landscaping. Lawn maintenance. Now all those sort of things demand processes, and to have somebody that already wrote the book on it certainly is a route to go. We've got a couple clients that started out as pressure washing companies that are now franchising and have maybe 6 or 7 and really just starting to get a foothold on that. And we love recruiting for them. We absolutely love recruiting for them because we've got it dialed in, because they've got their description of what they want this person to do, how they want them to do it, and that expectation piece all the way through the job ad, all the way through to the messaging, through the workflow, and getting them to the interview and the interview conversation. All those expectations and messaging just flow beautifully through the entire process. So they're really not surprised on what they're doing, the training, and they have confidence through the roof. And that's a big deal. That's just a little example of the importance of that.
And one other last key thing that I also want to mention, and the hiring piece is huge because yes, the messaging, everything can go across the same way and you don't keep making the same mistakes over and over again. But one key piece that people don't realize when you have with franchising is a community. And you have your systems and processes in place, but as you grow, you're gonna fall. And when you have a community to support you and say, hey, you know what, I've gone through the same thing, I would do this differently, that is a key element.
Yeah.
And people need that. And when you're with a franchise, they generally usually have a Facebook, not necessarily group, but it's called Workplace, or a forum that you can go in and everyone comes together so you can all help each other grow.
Yeah, I think that's key. And actually, John Hewitt had mentioned that too. He said a lot of the great ideas they get at the sort of corporate office comes from the field of franchisees, because they're out in the battlegrounds, they're experiencing it. And when things change, economies change and labor markets change, sometimes the processes and how we need to market, or the message that we have to, and I hear a lot of times when I talk to business owners, and Craigslist doesn't work, Indeed doesn't work, nobody wants to work anymore, all those sort of things just ain't true. Okay. It's just not true. And so to have somebody in the community that's doing things very well, and they're successful, especially in franchises, those are people you want to talk to, right? And those are the people you want to learn from. They've been there, done that, and that's where great ideas come. And I know I've certainly been copied off of our business model with hire, lead, and chill, and it's become more competitive. I see it all over the place now, the way we do some of our things that we do, and underneath it's a little frustrating, but the bottom line is, if we're helping the industries in the space that we're involved with, and it's more competitive, it keeps us on our toes, it makes us better, which is going to be better for everybody. So I think you're onto something when people start copying you, and you just need to make sure you're doing it better. That's all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. All right, Eric, I appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna get back with everybody. Look for us next Tuesday. I'm actually doing a podcast with Melody Edwards on her Misfits podcast, I think she calls it, on tomorrow. Maybe, I don't know if it's live though, but we'll promote that a little bit. I'm gonna have Erica's contact information posted as soon as we get off. And if you want to save some money, grow the company, you got to reach out to Erika. She's the go-to. Everybody have a good day. Take good care, and always positive.
Thank you so much, Shawn, for having me.
You're welcome. Bye, Erika. Take care.